This is the Kestrel Country Podcast, where we discuss people, places, and events all around Kestrel Country. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Kestrel Country Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Church, joined here once again by my lovely wife and co-host, Catherine.
Hello, hello.
And we are at Kestrel.
Wow,
We're
amazing.
downtown on this hot and smoky Friday.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been super hot and dry this summer. We have been a little bit dry on getting podcasts out to everybody, so sorry about that. But this one we actually recorded a little while back.
Yep.
With Mr. Luke Ryan of North House.
And this was just you.
That's right. It was just me. So, but you get to share in the intro.
I actually haven't. It is fun, but I haven't heard the podcast with Luke yet.
Oh, you're going to love it.
I will. I'm excited.
No,
Luke
really.
It's great. He's super artistic. He's passionate about architecture. I know that. And he's helped us out. And so I'm excited to hear what you guys talked about.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Talked about design, some history, a little bit of his story and what he's doing with North House. I love the name. That was the name of my grandparents' lake house growing up. They called it North House. So anyway, pretty fun. Great discussion with Luke, and we're definitely going to have him on again and talk more about architecture, design, and building here in Moscow, Idaho. Luke Ryan.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. So tell us a little bit about maybe first just your background. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What do you like to do?
Yeah. Born in Boise, lived there for 1 year. I actually have a memory from the apartment we lived there. Yeah, I remember the carpet.
So, but born in Idaho.
Born in Idaho. Very shortly after that, my folks moved to Montana, where I lived for 12 years. Grew up roaming the Jewel Basin, Flathead Valley.
Oh, nice
area. You've been out, I think, to Flathead Lake, where we have a place. So still very close connection to that area and to the mountains and the snow and the ice. And then, my folks wanted to get back to the Moscow community where they both had met here in Moscow, going to college.
Oh, nice.
My mom was a star mid-distance runner for the U of I track team, and my dad is a California boy whose granddad had told him to get up north.
Nice.
And so he did. We came back here. My parents wanted to be in a community where there were a lot of options for colleges, which, hey, there's at least three.
We've got those.
4 in the direct area, at least. Yeah. LCSC, U of I, WSU, NSA, all the acronyms.
Yeah. North Idaho College, if you're talking,
Yep. So I did. I went to the U of I and got a degree in business. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and started in engineering. Switched to business because it was way easier.
Have you seen...
which I would not recommend people doing. I would say get an engineering degree or a science degree. If it's hard, it's worth doing.
Have you seen Muppet Christmas Carol?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Business.
You are going to... It is...
Get into
the
business.
American way.
Yes. That's what I always think of. Anyway.
Yeah.
Tangent. So you studied business at U of I.
Yep.
And then...
And all the while I was going to school, I was working full time, even during school, as a framing carpenter. I had needed a way to pay for school, which was really easy to do back then because school was cheap at the U of I. Anyway,
everything was cheap. OSB was cheap back then.
No, yeah, I think it was like $2,000 a year to go to the U of I when I started, and so easy to pay for. And
when you and I worked together,
yes, we could bring that. That was
in a summer.
We did
while you were doing that. Yeah. Concrete
and that
dirt.
And construction was booming at the time. I think that was 2005, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And 2006. And so you could, as just a laborer and then a carpenter, you could make a fair bit of money. There were a lot of jobs available, a lot of people building houses who shouldn't be building houses. And then the big crash came shortly afterwards. So yeah, I got out of college and was looking for a job in business, and somehow kept getting drugged back into construction. My intervals not working construction were actually very, very brief. And I just had this idea that, you get out of college, you've got a degree, you shouldn't be working with your hands for some reason. I actually remember after that summer watching you. I think you went and got a job in sales at MZ. Yep. Or intern or something. I can't remember at the time.
Sales at MZ.
Had you finished?
Absolutely.
Had you finished college at that point?
No, I started there. during my senior year.
Yeah.
Yep. So I was part-time and still doing school.
So I actually remember thinking, like Mike, I don't want to do sales. Absolutely not. Which is ironic because that's a lot of what I do now. But yeah, like Mike, he went and got this great job and is working,
sitting behind a desk,
exactly,
wasting away.
But my dad's a software engineer. I just always figured that both my grandfathers were university professors. That if you are going somewhere in your life, you get a job that is an office job or some sort of cerebral activity, not thinking that actually what goes into plumbing a house or laying a foundation, there's actually a lot of head work in that. Yeah. So that's actually, I think, a big misunderstanding that our generation has, is kind of a disdain for the trades, and we are suffering for
sure.
it. Yeah. And so now I actually am largely out of the trades. I started an architecture firm about a year ago, and that was we can talk about that. That was
for sure.
That was a path and a transition.
To back that up, though, you said like construction kept coming back to construction. Was that because of just like, man, I really love doing this, or was it more of an opportunity, need to make money kind of thing? Just curious. Like, was it like, man, I don't want to be sitting behind a desk. I want to go do construction.
I was working on this construction crew right after I got out of college, and didn't like my boss. And if he listens to this, I'm sorry, dude, but you know who you are. And I had this mentality, like, I need to get a job as a manager somewhere. And so I just, without even having a job, just quit and spent. And at the time, the whole economy had this is 2009.
Yeah.
I had just gotten married. We had a bunch of money saved up. It's like, I can afford to just look for a job. And it was tough, like 2 months of pounding the pavement. Finally got a job as a office manager at an accounting firm over in Pullman, where I learned a bunch about how to not be afraid of the IRS. It was a great experience. And I absolutely hated it. There were some interesting people to work with who were very good at what they did. So I did learn a lot. But then to give you an idea, after 6 months making it through a tax season, like the hectic tax season, my boss called me into his office and said, "Hey, our nephew wants your job. You're out of here," and handed me a 2-week check.
Oh, wow.
And I was elated, just so excited. And then I had just gotten like 2 phone calls from guys saying, "Hey, I really want you to come do this project." One of them was the storm cellar downtown. Austin Storm called me up, and I had helped him with his first remodel. He said, "Hey, I want someone to do this." So I just jumped right on that. And I think that was probably my first, I had this memories of working on framing crews, framing all these spec homes over in Pullman, and just being in these subdivisions where we're building all these, kind of basic houses, and looking down on these people have just gravel in their backyards and vinyl siding and whole swaths of the house without a single window. And I'm looking at all these, material, like all this hardy plank and all these windows we're putting in places, and thinking, man, it would be so easy to take these exact same materials and just rearrange them a little bit and, not put gravel all across your backyard and make this place attractive and beautiful instead of what kind of feels like our traditional idea of a suburban hell. And it's, like those are places for people to live. People do form good memories there. I'm not going to, knock on, I have a love for, what will probably someday become slums and then hopefully reinvigorated, renewed. But,
but there's a way to do things that are there where you're not only looking at efficiencies and everything else, but design. So that was that started ticking in my head. Okay. And I thought I want to, and that came back around when, I was doing the storm cellar and I realized that as the builder, I had a lot of control over how things would look. And so I started drawing things before we would build them and working with, my client with those drawings and to a certain level of, success. And with a lot of positive response from the client and from, their customers afterwards and from the community. And I thought, okay, this is how I'm going to do my little part to affect change, is to work with clients on their kitchen remodel and say, and I just had never really thought of being a designer or an architect as a job, because I just had my only interaction with those people was very distant. And it's the nature, and I was on some jobs where we were building some larger, higher end custom homes that had been designed by architects, but we never saw the architect, never talked to him. We just got this set of plans that usually was bad, and not bad as far as the aesthetics, just there was very little information on how to build the house, and a lot of it was conflicting, and we had to sort stuff out. So I always thought, architects are bad. The builders are the builders are the heroes who actually, like, architects just kind of create more problems, it seems like. Had just, grew up in a family where there's, engineer for a dad, professors, lawyers, doctors, economists, no architects. There were some there, and I guess I just thought of it as sort of an artistic vocation. It's like trying to go be a singer-songwriter, which incidentally is, something I tried. Well, so the artistic part, when you said you started like drawing stuff up on the storm cellar and that kind of thing, did you do that growing up? I mean, would you have thought of yourself as artistic other than the singer-songwriter stuff? No, I drew pictures of ships and swords. And, there you go.
But I remember drawing a picture of a table and kind of getting into like drawing tables, furniture, stools, and getting a lot of positive feedback on it from my classmates and being like, that's interesting. And I just figured it was because it was something that people were more interested in than maybe a picture of a ship. That's
not a consistent theme.
No,
it was kind of more of the, just related to the construction.
No, and I definitely am not an artist. If you ask me to draw a beautiful picture of a house, freehand, watercolored, I'm not the best guy for the job. I definitely sketch stuff because working manually with my hands, I like modeling things by hand. But ink and paper is one of the quickest go-tos, drawing the elevation of the front of a house and the plan to start to work through ideas. I spend most of my day when I'm drafting and drawing using the computer, and that's actually a great problem-solving tool, but there's nothing like, I'll even if I'm stuck, print something out that I've been working on and just get away from the computer, get out the trace paper, get the markers out, and often your mistakes with the marker end up being your best solutions to the problem you're working on. And there's just something about that connection. I know, my dad, who's a software engineer, when he needs to solve a really intense coding problem, he gets away from his computer, yellow pad of paper and a pencil, and goes to town. So there is, I think that's a natural human thing. And I remember going to who's the gal who works with cattle and
Temple
Grandin. Yeah, I went to she did a talk down in Lewiston a couple of years ago.
Oh, awesome.
And she was actually had been working with a bunch of engineering and architecture students, and she was talking about how they all just had no idea how to solve problems outside of using these computer tools that they've been given. And she said, these things are great and amazing and they're multipliers. But I just see the total lack of creativity that comes from not knowing how to work with your hands and to solve just problems on paper. And there's stuff that I don't know anything about architecture, engineering, but stuff stands right out at me that I can say, hey, let's walk over here on the blackboard and sketch things out. So that was really interesting to me, and I think I connected with that.
So, so from there, you continued to do construction.
Yep.
So tell me about North House.
Okay, yeah.
So how long ago? When did you start?
That was just almost exactly a year ago.
Oh, nice. A little COVID startup.
Yeah, exactly. What happened was I had been working for a number of years as a foreman, largely doing framing, finish work, roofing for Anderson Family Construction here in Moscow. And we had been doing a lot of new construction, and they were really starting to push the design build thing. And Austin was doing a lot of the designing. He had bought a piece of software called Chief Architect, and we had been getting a lot of designs from other, architects outside of the community, or that clients would bring to us, say, hey, we bought these plans, here's our budget, and just the plans wouldn't work, the budget wouldn't work. So we would just redraw the house. And Austin, again, Austin was doing most of that, but he would bring me in since he knew my interest, and I would help him with that. And we would do that at night, and then go build the houses during the day.
Yeah.
And it had kind of, come around to where I was considering where to go, and I had started to develop a higher level of interest in the design. So I decided to go apply for to get back into school and to maybe get a structural engineering degree. I was like, I'll just give this a try. Told Austin I was probably going to either work part-time or quit. And he said, you should work for me for another year, and here's the deal. I'll give you more money. And I was like, great, I'll put it off for a year. So I did. That year, I remember the day. That year was coming around. Austin and I were both rolling a floor system for this house that we had designed. We had a bunch of problems with our design where we just hadn't spent enough time on it. There had been a couple of mistakes we had to fix in the field. No one to blame but ourselves, right? So we're kind of, grinning, going through this. And he says, hey, yells to me, will you keep working for me if I let you just do all the design stuff and make sure it gets done right, and you can take more time to do that? And I said, yeah, sure. After this house is done, we'll talk about you taking over my framing crew, and maybe I'll do a bunch of your admin stuff. And his younger brother too had been taking on a lot more management stuff.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, we're rolling the trusses for that house, and big gust of wind picks up, and the trusses pitch over, and I'm up in them, and I get chucked off the roof. Barely remember any of it, down into my head and onto my legs.
Oh. Second story.
Nope. Just it was a rancher. It wasn't bad. Just right onto the floor, onto the framed floor system, and hurt my hip pretty bad. And the next, show back up to our Monday meeting, and it's like, I don't think I can get out. What do you think about me? So that actually kicked me into, I stranded myself in the office, and started to learn some of the software a lot better, and started meeting with clients directly, and started designing some houses. Massive learning curve, kind of being self-taught on a lot of that stuff. Really, really getting into it, saying, okay, this is now what I'm going to do. So I have to really give credit to those guys, to Austin and Daniel, for putting some faith into me and saying, let's just have you do this. And but something that I've noticed is that there's been some other building companies here in town who've are doing the design build thing, and they've tried to hire a full-time designer, and it's tough even with a mid-sized company. I think you have to be a larger company to really keep a designer busy full-time. So what my weeks would kind of look like is I work my 40, 50-hour weeks doing design for 2 weeks, and then I'd have a week where I was only in the office for like 10 hours and would get out on a crew. And I just wasn't that effective I wasn't bringing value to those crews anymore, just working part-time like that. Definitely wasn't worth what I was getting paid to just come out and swing a hammer a little bit and kind of, sometimes be kind of a drag where it's like I'm being caught up to speed or whatever. If it's something that I maybe wasn't as involved with on the design, especially. I was getting a lot of interest for additional work that was outside, for additional design work and architecture that was outside of what Anderson family would build. And I really noticed a sort of trepidation of these clients coming in and saying, hey, we don't necessarily want AFC to build this, but we'd really be interested. We've seen your work. We like it. Be interested. Can we just do it? And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. I can. But it was getting awkward. And then we were looking at, the insurance stuff involved with designing stuff that we weren't building, and our insurance company kind of looked at us with big eyes. It was like, not sure this is a good idea. So it became clear that starting a separate design company was the way to go. And in looking at how to do that, we were just thinking to start, sort of a sister company or something. But I just decided that it really would be best for me on my own to just start a totally separate company.
So you just
separate barns, separate houses. Took that leap, and still partner directly with Anderson Family Construction, and now with actually a couple other builders that do, one specializes in remodeling, another one in additions, and they're doing the design build thing too, and I'm their designer.
That's cool.
It's kind of presented as...
So in that case, like, are they kind of creating a design build package, and then they're paying you instead of a client coming and saying, hey, I want you to design my addition, and they'll go find a contractor afterwards?
That's
or whatever.
How we've been doing it a lot. We're starting to structure it. It's starting to work out pretty well for those builders. They've realized once I develop a level of trust with them and a good working relationship, a good system of work, and we've got our shared spreadsheets and client tracking stuff, it's making a lot more sense for them to just set up an initial meeting with me and the contractor and kind of hand me over to the client, or hand the client over to me. And I just build the client directly and work with them with input from the builder throughout the design process for pricing and just basic structural ideas or ideas for materials, which is extremely helpful. And that continues to sharpen me. So that's a big chunk of my day to day.
Yeah. Where did you come up with the name? Or North House?
I stole it from your family home. Apparently, your guys' vacation home.
I know, it's funny.
Which is just a coincidence. But I was just needed to name the company something. I was thinking, my last name is Ryan, so just Ryan and Co. something like that. But I really wanted to give it a name that, as hopefully the company grows, other people could come on and really feel a part of ownership, and not just. I didn't want the company to be all about me.
Yeah.
And I have this real connection to snow and to the north. Growing up in Montana in the mountains, and then here to build. I've spent many years now framing, pouring concrete in adverse weather conditions, dealing with how that's going to affect the house once we get it dried in, and just having to work in this northern-ish climate. My mom's from Canada, so I know we're not really, really north, but I have that connection as well.
The Great White North.
Great White North. And I was talking to a couple of kind of my mentors and business associates, and they were saying, think of this as like, what do you want this to be? Do you want this just to be Luke Ryan and Co., or do you want it to be something bigger? And I was like, well, if I'm going to think way bigger, let's think about these schools of architecture that I really respect. Like one of the earliest movements in modern architecture that was actually a somewhat decent approach to domestic design was the Prairie School. And I thought, well, how about we need a Northwest School, because there needs to be a way that we build houses so that they last here in the Northwest. So it should be the North School. And I was like, well, but I'm not really starting a school of architecture. I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. So it'll just be North House architecture. Firms, especially, it seems like in France or wherever, are often called a house. So it'll be, Bordeaux house, whatever, of architecture. And it's been adopted by a lot of American firms as well. So
that's cool.
Yeah, just basic North House of architecture.
Do you feel like that the North aspect of it, Northwest, but just the North in general, is that kind of feed into your design aesthetic too? Like, do you feel like you're focusing on designing a Northwest kind of thing? Or
yeah, absolutely. And that ties into, I think, a lot of different styles of architecture. America is a very eclectic place. You generally won't see a mission style house going in here in Moscow, Idaho, or any of these other, more northern towns, or in a logging town. Necessarily, there is the
there's a few.
Yeah, there's a few, but it actually can work out pretty well if somebody really does want to do that. You can use that roof style and those materials, appoint them properly, and but yeah, it's interesting to see where stylistically it will go. But the main thing I'm looking at is these building systems, basically building science stuff of how to use the contemporary materials that we've been given, stuff like engineered lumber and new forms of insulation and all the siding systems that are still developing, really, and seeing what kills houses versus what will make a house last a long time. And that's one thing that I'm really interested in is just the materials and how the materials are assembled, detailed out, and it's basically nailing boards on boards with plastic sheets in between and stuff. And when is that good? Where should those plastic sheets go? Should they even go there?
Is that something that the typical architect is thinking about?
I think so. I think it's just, are they thinking about it in the right way? And are they thinking about it in a way that's actually going to get performed properly by your average builder?
Yeah.
And that's the big disconnect, is I think they'll say, here's this membrane you need to wrap around the house. And the builder looks at that and says, this is going to cost so much to do. And I know my client's budget is this. So, not going to do it, basically, or I'm going to fake it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of again, out of a place of ignorance. I haven't really known many architects, been involved with that. I did some construction back in the day and things. But I always kind of felt like the architect is more of it's like, this is the design.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Like, that's awesome.
And that's the way it's become.
But not so much of, this is how the thing's going to get built. I'm thinking about the materials and all those kind of things. I mean, you can see those, spec'd out on construction drawings, but I don't know. It seems like that's a unique thing. Do you know, is it very common for architects to have worked in the trades, to have gone through, have construction experience? Or is a lot of it kind of going back to our earlier conversation about, people just going and getting a degree and getting to an office job as being like, that's the goal?
Yeah. It is not common anymore. It used to be 100 years ago, it was a requirement. You would spend 3 years in school learning structural engineering stuff, a year that would really focus on the artistic side. And then you had to go, like during that time or before that time, you would have had to apprentice in a trade, usually masonry or timber framing or something like that. Huh. And that was because at that time, architects were, if you wanted something built, especially something bigger, not just a house, architects were the designers. If you wanted a house built, you just hired a carpenter, and a carpenter was trained in architecture. They had they had plan books. That's why you see all these old houses. They weren't like, you see these beautiful, most of these Victorian houses often would come from a plan book, and then the the builder would modify that. They copied everything by hand anyway if you needed extra copies. So he would just change the plans to add some extra rooms or take something away, or just draw a new set working with his clients. They were trained in, like a good builder was trained in drafting and would design that. And that's why you see all these houses that are 100 years old, and even the simplest little folk Victorian style house is generally quite attractive in form and, if not in function always.
That's what we liked. I mean, you worked on our house.
The one you guys are in now. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we love it, why we were looking for an old house, is like it was a cheap house back in the day, clearly, like not super well built. This is like built by farmers,
Yeah, just like my parents' house. It was built by the people who ended up living there, and they designed it, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's like, nice wide overhangs, nice roof pitch. Like it's an attractive little simple house.
Yeah.
And that's always one of those things that's kind of been, I think especially around here, I don't want to dog on local, designers, contractors, that kind of thing, but I feel like compared to the Southeast or even like Detroit, where I grew up, Midwest, just so many things like you were talking about over in Pullman building, spec houses. So many things like they cut the corners on all those little aesthetic things that could make a very simple, cheaper house still look attractive and a little more timeless,
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of things that have changed over the last 100 years that I think have influenced the direction that building has gone. And it ranges from, I think tax policies to the general philosophical foundation and, ideas behind architecture. Modern architectural theory has really, started in the 1800s, but has really taken hold. And what it basically says is there is no order. There is no one way things should be done. And it's an Enlightenment theory, or post-Enlightenment theory, and it has an effect, and you can see it on our civil and public structures especially, but that trickles down to a weird tension in domestic architecture where people deep down want and really can only afford what is basically a traditionally built house. But if there is no order that should be followed with how a house should be built, then you get what you get. And you have builders who are no longer schooled. There is no prevailing thought of this is how something should look, or something. If something's going to be attractive or good. So that's a whole nother, that could be hours of discussion.
We'll have to come back to that.
Sure.
Next year. What are you guys doing now? So it's North House is a year old.
Yep.
Ish.
Yeah, well...
And is it just you? Do you have other folks working with you?
Yeah, I have a one employee full-time who's just finishing his grad degree here at the U of I, and he's fantastic and is really taking a lot off my shoulders. I'm really excited for this summer when he is not finishing up his thesis. That's in a couple weeks, really. Okay. So that's awesome. And a couple other part-time people, including an older architect who's worked in the area for a long time and is kind of acting as a mentor to us.
Oh, cool.
Coming in. Yeah, that's awesome because we are young. And I do have the building experience, but there's a lot in the drafting and design world that you just have to step in pace with the industry. And a lot of it's good technical information to have on board and to follow. And excited to grow a little bit. Working on just a lot of people are moving to Moscow, and houses are hard to find, as you may know.
We've seen that.
So a lot of people are moving here, trying to find land. People are coming in and buying, like they want to live in town in Moscow and can't find a lot. They find some derelict house, buy it, tear it down, build something. So
we're starting to see that. That's something that ever since I moved here 18 years ago, I was kind of been waiting for that time. Like, when is it going to be that some of these older Fort Russell places or, where it's going to start to make sense. Cause we were seeing that back in Michigan where I grew up and everything. And obviously you see that in bigger cities. And, and it's like just in the last year or so, you start to see that happening. It's like, okay, yep. The values are there now that it can make sense to do that.
And I'm very grateful that Moscow's code, which we could talk about building codes for a long time, but it's pretty progressive in a good way as far as allowance for aesthetics. I've been working over in Pullman doing some of the same stuff across the border in Washington, and they regulate the facade and roof lines of buildings in a way that, I mean, if you're going, for instance, if you're going into a neighborhood and you just want to do an addition or build a new house and there's a bunch of ranchers there, you basically have to build a rancher, like to an extent, or something else that kind of looks like it. Which I understand some of the intent behind.
There's
continuity.
There's good times for continuity in a neighborhood. There's sometimes when it's like, oh, why did that go there?
Not exactly. And not that you can't get a variance on that stuff, but that's a whole nother discussion.
So you are working in Washington and in Idaho.
Yep.
Is there like architecture?
Doing a house for your sister in
Seattle
right now?
I know. I saw some early drawings that looked awesome. That's super cool.
Even as far as out of state stuff goes, getting to do some stuff in Wyoming. It has to be in the north though. I can't do anything in Arizona.
No southern. Is there like different licensing for different states when you're talking about architecture?
Absolutely.
So do you have to, like for Wyoming, did you have to get licensed in Wyoming? Or?
Nope. Most states do not, a lot of states do not require a license for domestic architecture. So it even varies in Washington from county to county, what you have to do. But when it is required, especially if you're doing a commercial project where it's always required, it is not at all hard to find someone who either works in that state or is licensed in that state and just partner with them to review and help with the initial planning of the project. And that's very, very common and is the way to go. It generally doesn't make sense to get number of the people I work with here in town are licensed in Oregon, Montana, Washington, Idaho, and that makes sense because we're right here in the Panhandle. A lot of our surrounding geographic area really is in other states. But it also depends on the size of your firm. If you're a bigger firm, it's not hard to just try and get licensed in a bunch of states.
Yeah.
Have different people taking care of that.
So do you feel like you guys have a particular niche that really, are you doing mostly new construction? Are you doing any additions and stuff like that?
Yeah, doing a lot of additions and remodels. I mean, again, young firm, so we're willing to do anything. But I really enjoy working with clients just designing a fireplace well. That's a project I'm working on now. We do a lot of bathroom remodels where it really is. Sometimes it's pretty quick. They just need to make sure that the toilet and the sink are going to work in this place. But most of the time we're getting into just making sure the vanity is done properly and the mirror and the light placement is going to be right. And it's the sort of thing that with the drafting and modeling software that we have now, we can do it very quickly. And it's generally just a one day, we come in, we draw it and kind of design it right there, have our initial meeting right there, and then circle back around in a week or two with maybe a few more details, done. And so that keeps it affordable for a lot of people who are already
might be intimidated by like, oh man, I don't know if I need to hire or can afford to hire a designer to do this simple bathroom.
Right. Well, one of the reasons we're getting a lot of these is because builders realize that it makes their bidding process a lot more precise so they can be more competitive with a set of drawings when things are well defined. So a lot of builders are just insisting on it. That's part of what's getting us work for those little things where people are say, yeah, I'm not really sure if I want to pay another person. I think what really, some of it is just personal preference and confidence in we're pretty sure we can visualize what this space is going to look like, because you could say, yeah, we're just redoing everything. New tub, new vanity, tile, this tile, that tile. And I can visualize it. I like everything, white and blue. I love these materials. You probably don't need to hire us. But there's other people who say, I think I like this. This is my idea. I've seen this picture. Will it actually look good?
Yeah.
In my bathroom? I just can't see it. And that's where we can, make a color rendering really quickly and put your exact materials in there. And
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But the majority of our work is the bigger projects are new construction. A lot of infill stuff, which is really fun, working with developers here in Moscow. Probably my favorite project right now is this apartment building that's in the early stages of design that's going right next to your old office.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. They're taking down an old house there. And yeah.
That's a good thing.
I guess I like that old house. Not the color.
It is a cool old house.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah.
I actually got to draw that house in detail. I think they were when they were changing it to a school for a little while. They needed some stuff to get past the city. And so got to go spend a day inside the house.
Nice.
Modeling it out.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that, like an old boarding house and some of those things. And is there, are there any like trends that you're super excited about that are, that you see kind of coming either to Moscow or just in design in general that you want to see people utilize more? Or maybe some trends that you're like, I really hope this doesn't stick.
Yeah. So for me, it's going to be a materials thing right now. You remember on that house we worked on together, the basement was made out of something called ICF.
Oh yeah.
Insulated concrete forms. And
styrofoam Legos with concrete.
They've been around since the 80s. And it's getting used more and more, especially up in Canada a bunch, because it works great in a northern climate, especially if you want to pursue alternative cladding materials. But it works fine with regular siding. That could be a whole thing. But with prices of lumber going up,
yeah,
it's actually
I've heard that concrete's
cheaper to build with concrete right now.
Yeah.
It's especially it depends on, again, cladding and finishes, because you can go crazy and say, hey, but one of the things about building a concrete building is or at least a shell out of concrete is that it's going to last a lot. Like what really places that start to rot on wood houses are those joints between floors. There's all this mechanical stuff that goes in there. All this condensation can get built up in there over just a couple of years. I've torn out floor systems that are 4 years old because somebody didn't do the dryer vents right.
Yeah. And
it's much easier to get that right with a well-insulated masonry building like that. Not to mention the basic strength, like the actual, if a truck runs into your house.
Yeah.
The truck gets
and an insulation factor.
Yeah, the insulation factor is I think it's actually higher than they advertise because of the air sealing effect that just pouring mud in between two slabs of foam gets you. And it's easy to get right. It's not these high end timber frame or stick frame houses. To air seal them, they go to all these steps, and it's highly trained professionals who come in and tape and caulk, and then they spray, they blow all this, sticky powder through the house to get every little pinhole air gap to seal up, which is a good thing if you then put in the right mechanical air exchanger stuff to keep the house well ventilated. But it's also a good thing for not letting moisture into your house. With something like ICF, I'm being a salesman here, but you can have a crew who is used to stacking cinder block buildings, build it easily and without any expensive, highly specialized detailing. The house is sealed up really well. But I think I would just be excited to see more masonry buildings and the potential for the aesthetic that can bring, because it's a this is the more expensive option, but it's a natural option if you want to clad in brick.
What about like red brick? Like, is that what you mean? Like just regular old masonry?
Regular red brick.
So the funny thing is I don't really associate that with the Northwest.
Not at all. No.
But it's funny. But
the cheap option too is stucco, which you definitely do not associate with.
But the other thing though is like older homes, like a couple houses that I've sold. So cool to see some of the older bricks that say Moscow, Idaho on them. Yeah. Right? You're like, whoa, they were making brick here.
Yeah, came
out
how
cool is that?
The clay pit from off White Pine Flats
and these like local bricks. So it's like clearly, and obviously downtown we got a lot of brick buildings and that kind of thing. But it is interesting. Like even the cheapest like spec houses back in Michigan would always have some brick on them.
Yeah, like, you got to put it on there, and you see that a lot.
And here it's like only real high end homes.
Well, you sold a house to my sister that's a little cute rancher, and it has the brick skirt right around the front. So like people would still do it, but that's a brick facade going onto a wood frame, which is not. You can do it, but what's happened with modern insulation codes and stuff is it's become detrimental to the wood frame behind if it's not properly flashed and waterproof and all that stuff. Yeah. Dealing with it right now on a multi-million-dollar home outside of town that was built a few years ago and has all this masonry cladding on it, and it has to come off. And it's very sad. And it's because the right moisture barrier wasn't put behind and the right flashing. I mean, they tried, but should have spent a few more $1 million, I guess.
Well, that's awesome. We kind of got to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
But we'll have to have you on again and talk more about some of the other stuff, maybe codes, maybe philosophy, all those kind of fun things.
Sure,
but
I'm sure your listeners would be very excited.
They are. In the meantime, how do people find you in North House and get a hold of you?
Yeah, Facebook, I guess. North House, Moscow, Idaho. I've been so busy and in the trenches that my website is very rudimentary. But if you go to northhouseco.com,
nice.
My phone number and email's on there. And shoot me an email or give me a call.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke.
Okay,
thanks for coming in. Fun conversation, and we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next week.